Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today on this beautiful Wednesday. We're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's webinar. This is NJSLA Adaptive 2026, What NJ Educators Need to Know. My name is Anne-Marie Lawrence, and I am the Director of Curriculum and Workshop Delivery here at Inspired Instruction. And I'm really excited to have all of you here this morning. As you're all aware, the state will be adopting a new testing platform for the spring 2026 NJSLA test. We have been in contact with the state DOE, and while the state has not yet released some of the specific information about the NJSLA adaptive test, we hope to shed a little more light for you on some of the things that we do know. My colleague, Dr. Jacqueline Sayano, is joining us this morning, and she'll be running the chat and the QA, so feel free to ask any questions that you may have, and we'll answer them as best as we can with the information that we do have. I also want to note that before we begin, that after the webinar, you will receive a follow-up document that aligns to today's session, and it'll be emailed to you within a week. So let's get started. Our agenda for our time this morning will begin by highlighting some of the things that we do know about the new adaptive NJSLA, including information about field testing. We'll take a look at some of the platform tools and sample question types. And then lastly, we'll hit on some practical strategies for preparing for the spring testing session. So here's what we know so far. So the state has released the schedules for both the fall field testing and the spring testing sessions. This is a quick overview of the schedule, but more information can be found on the DOE website. For fall field testing, students in grade 11 and some students in grade 12 will take the NJGPA adaptive. Only grade 12 students who were not previously successful on the ELA and/or math NJGPA, or who need to participate to meet the state graduation assessment requirement, will participate in that field test. Students in grades 4 through 10 will take the NJSLA adaptive field test, and test questions will cover content learned in the 24 to 25 school year. For the math NJSLA adaptive, high school students will take Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2 based on course completion from the 24-25 school year. Both testing sessions will occur between October 27th and November 14th, and there will be no testing on the following dates, November 4th, 6th, 7th, or 11th. I also want to note here that grade 3 students will not participate in field testing. Test items given to students, as I mentioned previously, will be reflective of the coursework they completed during the 24-25 school year. The reading and math field test sessions will run for 60 minutes, and the writing test will be 120 minutes in length. So here's a little bit more about field testing, some of the questions that you may have. All local education agencies and approved private schools for students with disabilities are required to participate in field testing. Students will not take complete sets of tests in any subject. It will just be a sampling of items across the different content areas. Student test results will not be shared with schools, educators, or parents. The sole purposes of the results are a few things. So we want to assess the quality and performance of the test items. They're looking to ensure that the test items are valid, reliable, and fair to all students, and then also to give students and educators an opportunity to become familiar with the assessment platform prior to the spring testing session. This is a quick overview of the spring testing schedule for NJSLA and NJGPA Adaptive. High school students, again, will take Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2 as needed based on their accountability requirements. Let's talk a little bit about the adaptive testing platform, which is the primary new feature. Computer adaptive tests are assessment tools that determine future questions based on student response to prior questions. The approach has a number of expected benefits. The test is a more personalized and accurate measurement of skills because questions adjust in real time based on student responses. There's an expectation of lower test anxiety since students are presented with questions closer to their readiness. And finally, there's stronger test security since each test differs from student to student. Some of the additional benefits that are expected from the adaptive assessment are that students can still review and change answers within a section prior to submitting the test, and accommodations for students who qualify will remain in place. And then it's also noted that shortening testing time is a goal, and additional items for this goal are still being developed. The new adaptive assessment will be managed by Cambium Assessment Incorporated, and that means that all aspects of the assessment will be managed by CAI. For more information, tools, and resources, you can go to the DOE website in the assessment portal. So we'll take a quick look so that you can see how to access that and what you'll find here. So there's information for testing personnel. There's information for students and families, and for your technology coordinators. It's important to note also that only ELA and math assessments will be shifting to the adaptive platform for spring. The science NJSLA will not be undergoing any changes for the current academic year. So we'll take a closer look at the platform tools, and many of the platform tools available on the new platform do align and are very similar to tools on the previously used platform. The primary differences are going to be the visual appearance of the tools and the process with which students navigate to engage those tools. Some of the platform tools are standard across all tests, and others will become available within a certain test session as needed. Additionally, there are the platform tools that will be only available for students who have been identified in advance. So we'll take a look at some of these tools together. The first tool we're looking at here is the line reader tool, and this tool highlights one line at a time and grays out the rest of the text on the screen. Students would click on the line reader icon in the top right corner of the test question to engage the line reader. Students must click on the line of text they want to highlight to move the line reader box. It will not move automatically. And to turn off the line reader, students will simply click that line reader icon again. Zoom is available during testing sessions for students to increase the size of text and graphics from 1.5 to 20 times their default size. Students will click on the zoom in icon to enlarge text and the zoom out icon to decrease the size of the text. It is notable that in order for students to zoom in past 3 times the default text size, the streamlined mode is required and needs to be enabled for the student. So I know some of you are thinking that's great. They can increase that size 20 times and that's what they'll be doing, but they won't be able to do that unless that's enabled for them in advance. A glossary tool is also available for students for some ELA and math items. Pre-indicated terms will be outlined with a gray box. Students will have to hover the mouse over the item to highlight it in blue. When students click to select the item, a pop-up box will appear that includes a definition or an image of the term. Students then select the X in the top right corner of the pop-up box to close it. So again, just to reiterate that these will be pre-indicated terms that will be outlined for use with the glossary. Students can also highlight and mark text that they want to remember. So in reading passages, mathematics stimuli, and in text-based answer options, students will have the opportunity to highlight. To engage the highlighter function, students will first click and drag the mouse to select the section of text that they want to highlight. Then they can either right-click to select a highlight color, or they can click the highlighter option key in the top right corner of the box. That will open their options menu, and then from there, they'll be able to select their highlight color. And as you can see through that same drop-down menu, students can access the strike-through tool, the Notepad tool, and they can mark and unmark questions for review. We'll take a look at those 3 tools next. So when a student marks a question for review, the question number will show a dog-eared corner and a small flag to signal that it has been marked. Students can navigate back to marked items at any time during the test session, and they can review and change answers within the current testing session only. And that's a feature that we're familiar with from the previous platform as well. The strike-through tool gives students the opportunity to cross out answer options that they do not want to choose. They can engage the strike-through tool in one of two ways. Either they can open the context menu we saw on the previous slide that also engages the highlighter feature and the mark for review feature, or they can right-click on the answer option that they want to strike out and then select the strike-through button. To disengage strike-through, they can press the escape key or select anywhere outside of the response area. They do not have to navigate back to a menu to disengage that tool. It's also important to note to students that striking out answers does not indicate a response, and they must still provide an answer to the question. The last feature that we see here is the Notepad feature. And this feature is item specific, so it will not be available on all test items. Students may use it to keep notes about a test item, and notes will continue to be saved as students move through the next segment, or if their tests are paused. The calculator tool is available for some mathematics test sessions. Students will simply select the calculator button from the menu, and when they're finished with the calculator, click the X in the top right corner of the calculator window, and that will close the calculator window for them. And again, just to reiterate that this tool will only be available during some of the mathematics test sessions. Accessibility tools are also available for students who have been identified, and accessibility tools will be pre-selected for students in the Test Information Distribution Engine, or TIDE, prior to testing. And as we know, the accommodations will increase equitable access during testing, and they'll be available for students with documentation. Some of those tools are what you see here. We've got a masking tool that will allow students to cover up distracting areas of the test page. To engage the masking tool, students will select the masking tool key and drag their mouse to choose an area of the screen that they wish to mask. To disengage, students simply will select that masking key again. And again, the masking tool will only be made available for students who have been identified in advance. There's also an accessibility tool for color contrast, and this will be available to eligible students. Tests will default to black text on white background, so students who require a different font or background color combination should be assigned the appropriate accommodation in the Test Information Distribution Engine. Color contrast selected will apply to all tests for that student. And the images that you see on the screen are the color contrast options that are available. Students who are eligible for text-to-speech, speech-to-text, or ASL testing support features will be indicated as so in the TIDE prior to test administration. Text-to-speech will allow students to listen to test content, including passages, questions, and answer choices. Speech-to-text allows students to speak responses that will be transcribed into the text response area. And lastly, eligible students can watch videos that translate text into American Sign Language. We'll take a few minutes here to look at some sample question types. This is a list of the item types that students will encounter during testing. And it's a pretty comprehensive list. Some of them are self-explanatory, but I would like to highlight just some key things. For the equation response items, these items will display for students either a basic numeric keypad or a full array of operators, symbols, and functions. And students must use the tools to complete the test item. So if it is an equation response item, it will require students to engage those tools. The evidence-based selected response questions, which is a phrase we've heard before with NJSLA in the past, are those multi-part questions that accompany a passage. and students must answer all parts of the question before moving on to the next question. Grid items are another item type, and these are interactive item types. Actions will vary for these grid items and will include dragging and dropping. Students can highlight, they might plot points and create lines and shapes, or the test items might require a combination of these actions. There are also hot text items that give students the ability to highlight or move text. Students can select, drag, and rearrange groups of words. And table items are tables with missing information, and students will need to complete the table by entering answers in the text boxes. Both of the extended response and short answer questions will provide students with a box to type responses freely. The difference between those two is that extended response items may also provide an editing toolbar with options to format responses in an essay form. The DOE website offers tutorial videos of all of the item types, and this link will be provided for you in your follow-up webinar resource document. So let's take a look at some of the sample questions. One thing I really do want to point out here, if you aren't already aware, is that with the NJSLA-Adaptive test, reading and writing will be assessed separately and will no longer become a combined process under the English language arts umbrella. As of now, the state has not released any details on testing blueprints or scoring of these items. However, practice tests are now available on the DOE website. And as we continue to learn more about blueprints and scoring processes, we'll certainly be sharing those things as well. For the reading test, students will receive a passage to read. They'll receive a series of follow-up questions that align to the passage, and the questions will vary in item type. This particular sample comes from grade 3. This question is a grade 5 practice test item, and this multi-part question connects to a passage. The passage will appear on the left side of the screen, and the two parts of the multi-part question will be stacked on the right side of the screen. And again, students must select an answer for each part before they can move on to the next question. Moving into some writing samples, this is a sample from grade 6, and this item represents an expository writing task that would be completed after reading the accompanying passage. This grade 9 sample is an argumentative writing task. And in this task, students actually read 3 source passages, and then they'll use those source passages for supporting evidence in their essay. To take a quick look at some of the math question samples, this is a grade 4 question. And this is an example of a multi-select response where students must choose all of the answers that apply. And questions like this are a great opportunity to help students to dissect the language used in testing items. A lack of awareness of this might lead students in this case to only select one answer when they are tasked with selecting multiple answers in this task type, which obviously would impact their score. So helping students to really recognize the key vocabulary in test questions is a great way to help students be more prepared. The last sample that we'll look at here is a grade 7 sample, and this highlights the table item that we spoke about earlier. So as I previously mentioned, practice tests are now available on the DOE website. And it will really be important for students to have time to engage with the platform before testing. Even students who have previously taken NJSLA will need time to adjust to the new platform, understanding how test items are presented, and how to engage with the testing tools. So I'd like to take a moment to show you how to navigate to the site to access the practice tests. This link to the practice test will also be shared with you in the resource document. So when you access your State Department assessment portal, you'll find the option here for students and families. And as you scroll down, you'll notice that there are different icons here that you can select. And we're going to select the practice test so that I can show you how to access these if you haven't already done so. You'll want to continue as a guest. And again, selecting the guest session item. You'll begin by selecting a grade level. So we've got grades 3 through 8, and then high school is lumped together. So we'll choose 7 just to practice. Clicking on the NJ practice tests link, this is where you'll find the more comprehensive way to move through the items the way that they'll be presented in the test. So we'll select this. When you get into this menu, you'll notice that you can select the option for the reading test, the writing test, or the mathematics test. The writing and mathematics tests, will take you directly into the option to open the test. For reading, there is a step ahead of time, so we'll take a look at that one just to clarify what needs to be done here. The first thing that you'll need to do for all of the content tests is to select your options here. For the reading portion, you'll need to identify that your sound is working by playing this very short video. What's important is that you must play the video in its entirety in order for the selection that you could play the video and sound option to appear. If you stop the video too quickly, this option will not appear, and that will block you from getting into the practice test. You'll simply click that you could play the video and sound, and then you'll click into Begin Test Now. And you'll see it takes you right into that practice test. Students will want to practice scrolling through passages, particularly when we're looking at those writing assessments that include multiple source documents. We'll want to make sure that we call students' attention to that and give them the opportunity to move around and navigate the passages even prior to reading or practicing the test. Just navigating the platform and the tools on its own is a great way to help students prepare. And they can then move through the different test questions here. So again, the link here will be shared in the resource document that you'll receive as a follow-up to our time today. So for some practical preparation strategies, there are a few key things that we feel are really important for educators and students to begin to engage in immediately in order to build confidence and help students to prepare. So when preparing students for NJSLA-Adaptive, again, it will be so important to engage students in NJSLA, and it will be so important to engage students in the platform early on, allowing them time to understand the presentation of test items and the functionality of the testing tools. Students with a higher level of comfort with the platform will be less likely to lose focus during testing when trying to navigate the tools. Students will also begin to understand the rigor of the questions being asked prior to the test. The more that we can expose them to what they'll see early on, the more comfortable they'll be later. Teaching students how to identify key vocabulary and test items that will help them to better understand what questions are asking of them is also a really great way to help students prepare. Spending time just on dissecting those questions and really identifying key vocabulary without even actually answering the questions is a great place to begin. It'll be important to keep instruction centered on the New Jersey Student Learning Standards for math, reading, writing, and language. This is a simple and natural way to help students prepare for testing. It's important for teachers to be using standard vocabulary in daily instruction so that students become comfortable with that language. It'll be crucial for students to have plenty of experience writing across the NJSLA writing standards. You can begin by incorporating short response tasks early on and gradually increasing the rigor and complexity over time. Another great way to help students to prepare is to work with them to outline a structure for working within a time constraint. and do a lot of practice. The added stress of timed tasks can have a negative impact on student performance. So the more comfortable students can get with working within a set time frame, the easier it will be when their testing comes around in the spring. It's important to present NJSLA aligned items in daily instruction, and this can be done in simple ways through do nows, exit tickets, and other forms of formative assessment. We have some suggested activities to share with you this morning, and we'll take a quick look at each of these. These samples will also be shared with you via your resource document after the webinar. So the first thing we'll take a look at is the error analysis activity. And the error analysis task will help students to look critically at math processes and paths to solutions. So this is a simple question of, can you spot my mistake? And we have seen on NJSLA math assessment test items previously that students are asked to identify and correct mistakes that they're seeing in math process and solution. So this is a great template that teachers can use with their students to begin practicing that error analysis. And it can be something that is used weekly so that students become really comfortable with the strategies that they need and the steps to take in order to identify those errors. Engaging in deductive reasoning activities will also help students because it will allow them opportunities to use text evidence to support their answers. This sample, again, will be shared with you, and students and teachers can move through and create additional deductive reasoning tasks based on this format, where students will engage in those multi-part questions. So they'll have to select their answer for the first part of their question. And in the second part of the question, that's where their reasoning will come in, where they have to use the evidence to support the answer that they've chosen in the first part of the question. The last thing that's important is to plan NJSLA aligned lessons. And we'll be sharing this lesson planning template with you through your resource document that you'll receive as follow-up. And it helps teachers to outline how they can align their instruction to NJSLA. It asks them to consider writing standards or types of question types that they want to incorporate, and how they will structure the text that they'll use, how they will align to standards, and how they will assess students in these tasks. So this will be a great way for teachers to really engage in lesson planning that aligns and that they can use on a daily basis. While high stakes testing can be a really stressful time for both students and educators, incorporating some of these tips right away can alleviate some of that angst and help build everyone's confidence. As I mentioned at the beginning of our time this morning, we are still waiting for some information to be released by the state, and we will keep abreast of that, and we will stay in contact with you and help to share anything that we can glean that will be helpful and supportive to you in your high stakes testing journey with the new NJSLA-Adaptive. I would like to thank you again so much for joining us this morning. It's our pleasure to partner with you in supporting your educators and your students. I have shared my email address with you here, and you can feel free to reach out with any questions that you may have. And again, we'll do our best to answer questions that are related to NJSLA-Adaptive the best that we can with the information that we currently have obtained. We would also really appreciate it if you would take a moment to complete our post-webinar survey. There'll be a link in the chat. It's really important for us to have your feedback so we can continue to improve upon the content that we deliver. One final reminder that you will receive that resource document within the week via email, and it will include links and resources that we've shared with you this morning. Thank you again so much for joining us. I hope you feel that you've had a little bit of light shed on some of the darker corners of NJSLA-Adaptive as we are on this journey together with the rollout. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to engaging with you again in the future. Thank you so much.